Right now, there's a suicide emergency with Indigenous Australian youth. Both Labor and Liberal governments have promised to put money into suicide prevention. However, past records show that throwing money at something can be pointless. Tracey Westerman, the 2018 Western Australian of the Year, is a respected clinical psychologist and Njamal woman who believes that money is often used for, and I quote, crisis-driven, reactive and ill-informed responses. How will your government ensure that families like those in the Kimberley can keep their children safe from harm?
Thanks, Francine. It's an epidemic. Again, not a topic which gets to the front of the newspapers, although to be fair, the media have actually covered some of this epidemic better than perhaps previously. Issue of suicide is massive, but also the issue of our first Australians and the inequality of the lives that many of them live is massive. There's an intersection. On mental health and suicide, Labor's committed to doing a whole range of suicide prevention projects, and to be fair, so is the government. So we're trying to do not just more resource, but make sure it's effective. So there are a range of projects in the city and the bush on that. But I think the theme I would like to particularly address in your question is the issue of unfair outcomes for Indigenous Australians. We don't have all night to go through everything that happens, but I tell you, I've got a unique idea to help make sure that Indigenous Australians get holistic solutions. I want to make Pat Dodson, who's from the Kimberleys, the father of reconciliation, I want him to be the first Indigenous Australian who's in charge of Indigenous matters in Australia.
Can you start by claiming that this is a national emergency? Because no one has done that. No one has put this on that level and committed all government resources necessary to do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's fair language. I think it's a national disaster, national emergency. I think, to be fair to a lot of people before me, people have tried to work at it, so I don't claim any special status in saying what I just said. But I do have a view about the nation. If any Australian's doing badly, that affects all of us. Sometimes in this country, we judge ourselves by how many billionaires we have on the Forbes, rich list. I have a view that we should judge ourselves by if we have great disadvantage. Now, some of the Conservatives say, oh, that's just all virtue signalling, and they're, cynical about it. We should be really proud of the fact that we share the continent with our first Australians who've got 60,000 years plus a continuous connection to country. I think we need to redefine our relationship with our first Australians, not from either indifference or paternalism to partnership. Now, the way we do that, and I know you're talking about suicide, which is the cutting edge, and for some of you might say, well, just work out the suicide and worry about everything else later, but it's all connected. If you don't feel that you've got stable housing, if you don't feel you've got access to a job, if you're split up from your family, if you lose connection to country, it all works on each other. So, we've got the suicide projects, but I'd also want to put to you that reconciliation in Australia and closing the gap is everything. It's putting our first Australians and recognising them in the nation's birth certificate, the Constitution. They had a whole lot of Aboriginal leaders attended a big meeting at Uluru. They came up with a declaration that they wanted to have a voice. They want to be consulted about laws made about them rather than just inflicted upon them. I think this is a reasonable idea. I don't think it means that we're creating a new House of Parliament just for Aboriginal Australians to be in charge of everything.
So very briefly, how would it work? Would it have a constitutional basis? And would it give advice to government that government had to follow on Indigenous affairs?
Well, Pat Dodson and Malarndirri McCarthy, our Labor Senator from the Northern Territory, and Warren Snowden, who's a long-standing member for Lingiari, and plenty of other people, have been working on how do you actually turn the idea of properly consulting our first Australians into a reality. Pat Dodson, Shireen Morris, who's our Labor candidate in Deakin, they've all worked on this. I think that we can create regional assemblies I think we can create a national body, and I think we can put it into the Constitution to consult. What it will not be as a third chamber of Parliament.
When you say you think you can, is this a commitment from
the
the
Labor
Labor
we've already
government?
made. It's in our policy. Yes, right. It is our commitment. For some of you wondering why we're talking about the Constitution and properly consulting First Australians and a voice and a structure, some of you might say, but that's not the practical stuff. Housing, school and jobs is what's practical. Well, that's true. Practical stuff matters. But if you want to have a relationship of equality, you've got to empower people to be part of the decision-making over their lives. You know, some people say that by giving Aboriginal Australians a voice, that they're getting a head start on everyone else. They get something special that no one else has. The reality is that our First Australians start behind everyone else. All we want them to do is have fair income, equal opportunity in this country.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you.